Bessie Coleman soared across the sky as the first African American and first Native American woman pilot. Known for performing flying tricks, Coleman's nicknames were Brave Bessie, Queen Bess, and the only race aviatrix in the world. Her goal was to encourage women and Black Americans to reach their dreams. Bessie Coleman, she sometimes used the name Elizabeth, was born in Atlanta, Texas on January 26, 1892, to Susan and George Coleman. Bessie was the 12th of 13 children. Her parents worked as day laborers, farmers, and cotton pickers. George Coleman managed to save enough money to buy a plot of land in Waxahachie, Texas in 1894 and built a shotgun house. In 1901, George, who was part Native American, left for Indian Territory in Oklahoma, where he thought he could avoid the racial oppression in Jim Crow Texas. He asked Susan and the children to come with him, but Susan chose to stay in Waxahachie and raise 4 of the children by herself, earning money as a domestic worker. Bessie grew up helping her mother pick cotton and wash laundry to earn extra money. By the time she was 18, she saved enough money to attend the Colored Agricultural and Normal University, now known as Langston University, in Langston, Oklahoma. She dropped out of college after only 1 semester because she could not afford to attend. In early 1917, Bessie Coleman married Claude Glenn, but never publicly acknowledged the marriage. The two soon separated. At age 23, Bessie went to go live with her brothers in Chicago. She went to the Burnham School of Beauty Culture in 1915 and became a manicurist in a local barbershop. Meanwhile, her brothers served in the military during World War I and came home with stories from their time in France. When her brother John showed up drunk one day at the barbershop and began taunting her about her job, he lit a fire of determination in Bessie. John often teased his sister about how the women in France had more opportunities. Women in France were so liberated, he said, they could even fly planes. Black women ain't never gonna fly, not like those women I saw in France, he said, as retold in Queen Bess' Daredevil Aviator, a biography of Coleman by Doris L. Rich. That's it, Coleman replied, smiling. You just called it for me. Determined to prove him wrong, Coleman reached out to several pilots for lessons, but none would accept her as a student. So she decided to go to France, where she thought her race and gender would not be insurmountable impediments. To prepare for the trip, Coleman studied French, solicited benefactors to help finance the venture, and found a higher-paying job managing a chili restaurant. On November 20th, 1920, she set off for Europe aboard the liner SS Imperator, then enrolled at the flight school founded by aviation pioneers Gaston and René Quadron at the Le Courtois in the Somme in northern France. Coleman was the only student of color in her class. There she began a 7-month course in flying a Narrator Type 82, a 27-foot-long biplane with a 40-foot wingspan. The plane was fragile, and Coleman had to inspect every part of it each time she went aloft. The Type 82 in which Coleman trained had 1 cockpit for an instructor and another behind it for the student. There was no steering wheel, there weren't even brakes. The instructor and soon Coleman handled a large wooden stick to control the plane's pitch and roll, and move the rudder bar with its feet to control its yaw. To stop the plane, the pilot would land, then drag a metal skid on a tail along the ground. Coleman learned aerial maneuvers like loop-de-loops, banking, and tail spins. She also witnessed an accident that killed another student. It was a terrible shock to my nerves, but I never lost them, Coleman was quoted saying in Queen Bess, I kept going. On June 15, 1921, Coleman received her pilot's license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, an organization that oversees airborne sports. The license granted her the right to fly anywhere in the world. When Coleman returned to the U.S. in September 1921, scores of reporters turned out to meet her. The Air Service News noted that Coleman had become a full-fledged aviatrix, the first of her race. She was invited as a guest of honor to attend the all-black musical Shuffle Along. The entire audience, including several hundred whites in orchestra seats, rose to give the first Black and Native American female pilot a standing ovation. Over the next 5 years, Coleman performed at countless air shows. The first took place on September 3, 1922, in Garden City, Long Island. The Chicago Defender publicized the event, saying the wonderful little woman Bessie Coleman would do heart-thrilling stunts. She dazzled spectators by walking on the wings while aloft or parachuting from the plane while a co-pilot took the controls. According to a reporter from Kansas, as many as 3,000 people, including local dignitaries, attended the event. Over the following years, Coleman used her position of prominence to encourage other Black Americans to fly. She also made a point of refusing to perform at locations that wouldn't admit Blacks. She enjoyed the attention so much that she decided to try acting and was cast as a lead in a film based on her life story. But she was turned down for the part after learning that the movie began with her character appearing in rags, which she found demeaning and undignified. "No Uncle Tom stuff for me," she told Billboard magazine. Coleman saw aviation as a way to empower Black people in America and dreamed of opening a flight school. She never did, but future pilots said they had been inspired by her, and flight clubs have been named in her honor. "I shall never be satisfied until we have men of the race who can fly," she told the Black newspaper, the Chicago Defender, in 1921, adding, "We must have aviators if we are to keep pace with the times." Coleman borrowed planes at first, but in time she saved up enough to buy one of her own, a military surplus Curtiss JN-4, known informally as the Jenny. Coleman went to Santa Monica, California to pick up the plane. While in California, she planned to perform in an air show near Los Angeles. But as she took off to fly to the fairgrounds, her motor stalled and she nosedived from 300 feet, breaking a leg, fracturing her ribs, and destroying her plane. She begged the doctor at the scene to patch her up so she can get on with the show. He called for an ambulance. "Tell them all as soon as I can walk, I'm going to fly," Coleman wrote in a telegram to her fans. It took her months to recover, and it was 2 years before she was flying frequently again. Coleman lived in Chicago and then in Houston, staging air shows all around Texas, but increasingly, she spent time on a lecture circuit. She often gave lectures to schools and churches to encourage young Black men and women to enter aviation. On one occasion in Waxahachie, she refused to give an exhibition on white school grounds unless Blacks were permitted to use the same entrance as whites. The request was granted, although the races remained segregated once inside. By April 1926, Coleman had saved up enough money to buy another plane, another surplus Jenny. She scheduled for an air show for May 1st, and on April 30th, she and her co-pilot, a mechanic named William Wills, took a practice flight in the new plane. Coleman sat in the second cockpit, unharnessed, so she could peer over the side to identify a good place for a parachute landing during the show. Wills flew the plane at about 2,000 feet for 5 minutes, then climbed to 3,500 feet. Witnesses said that the plane accelerated suddenly, nosedived, went into a tailspin, and flipped upside down at about 500 feet in the air. Coleman fell from the plane and plunged to the ground, dying on impact. She was 34. The plane also crashed, killing Wills, his body pinned under the plane. As rescuers tried to move the plane off him, one lit a match for a cigarette, igniting gas fumes and setting the wreckage in flame. Authorities found that a loose wrench had become lodged in the control gears, preventing Wills from righting the aircraft. Though the wrench should have been secured or even not in the plane, the cause was still determined to be accidental. Rumors of sabotage arose. They could not be stopped or verified. It was a tragic but not uncommon accident in the heyday of barnstorming. At the time, aircraft safety was being addressed by Congress with the Air Commerce Act of 1926 that mandated the regulation of pilots and aircraft. The mainstream press barely noted Coleman's death, instead focusing on Wills, who was white. but many black newspapers gave front-page coverage to her death. Coleman's body lay in the state of Florida and in Chicago, where about 10,000 people paid their respects. Journalist Ida B. Wells, who crusaded against lynchings, led the ceremonies. In her remembrance in 1931, the Challengers Pilots Association of Chicago started a tradition of flying over Coleman's grave every year. Coleman's story has been told in books, television programs, and in a French documentary. In 1977, Black American women pilots formed the Bessie Coleman Aviators Club. In 1995, the Bessie Coleman commemorative postage stamp was issued to honor all of her accomplishments. A middle school in Texas and several roads around the country, usually near airports, bear Bessie Coleman's name. It took time for Coleman to achieve the recognition she deserved. Mae Jemison, who in 1992 became the first African-American woman to go into space, wrote in an afterword to Queen Bess, Daredevil Aviator. She said she had felt embarrassed and saddened that I did not learn of her until my space flight beckoned on the horizon. I wish I had known her while I was growing up, Jemison continued. But then again, I think she was there with me all the time. In one way, she was indeed with her when Jemison left the Earth. Jemison carried a picture of Coleman with her into space, flying far higher and beyond the heights Bessie could ever dream of. Bessie Coleman's pioneering achievements is an inspiration for many. She was one of a kind. Her resilience and enduring legacy as a trailblazer in aviation and aerospace is solidified in history. She has earned her stripes and titles. Bessie Coleman, Queen Bess, the only race aviatrix in the world, and Onyx Queen. If you enjoyed this video, please share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching.